give us some insight into the nature of each version. The variations are not necessarily due to the translator's individualism. They must have existed already in the original texts. Let me give another parallelism, this time one in verse. The extracts are from Chapter 2, the opening gathas of Mahamati. The comparison will be only between the Tiang and the Sanskrit. As the way more or less agrees with the Sanskrit, while the Sung agrees with the Tiang, though the Sung as well as the way lack two verses corresponding to N of the Sanskrit. The most significant disagreement between Tang and Sanskrit concerns the awakening of a great compassionate heart. According to the Mahayanists, a heart is to be awakened in one that is above all forms of attachment and yet that feels suffering in the world as its own. Ln Sung and Tiang this idea is emphatically presented, whereas in Wei and Sanskrit it is missing. From this, can we not infer that there were at least two quite different texts of the Lankavatara from the early days of its existence as far as these gathas are concerned? I do not know how the present Sanskrit text could be made to read like Sung and Tiang. The philosophy of the Lankavatara asserts the emptiness or the not being born of existence. And it is quite right to say that the world is like a dream or transcends birth and death. But we must remember that this position is not one of absolute nihilism, because the Sutra teaches the reality of prajna itself or the truth of the mind only. So far the Sanskrit gathas here reproduced accord well with the principal ideas of the Lankavatara. But there is another element in the Mahayana, which is love or compassion, and when the world is surveyed from this viewpoint, it is filled with sufferings, sorrows, and undesirable events. These are also in a way dreamy happenings, but compassion sees them in another light and strives to eradicate them by all sorts of skillful means. For this reason, Sung and Tiang are preferable here to Wei and Sanskrit. Tiang 1. The world transcends birth and death, it is like the flower in the air. Transcendental. Wisdom cannot be qualified as being or non-being, and yet a great compassionate heart is awakened. Sanskrit 1. When thou reviewest the world with thy wisdom and compassion, it is to thee like the ethereal flower, and of which we cannot say whether it is created or vanishing, as the categories of being and non-being are inapplicable to it. 2. All things are like the mirage, they are beyond the reach of mind and understanding. Transcendental. Wisdom cannot be qualified as being or non-being, and yet a great compassionate heart is awakened. 2. When thou reviewest all things with thy wisdom and compassion, they are like visions, they are beyond the reach of mind and consciousness, as the categories of being and non-being are inapplicable to them. 3. The world is always like a dream. It is beyond nihilism and externalism. Transcendental. Wisdom cannot be qualified as being or non-being, and yet a great compassionate heart is awakened. 3. When thou reviewest the world with thy wisdom and compassion, it is eternally like a dream, of which we cannot say whether it is permanent or it is subject to destruction, as the categories of being and non-being are inapplicable to it. 4. The wise know that there is no self-substance in a person, nor in an object, and that both passions and their objectives are always pure in their nature, and have no individual marks. And yet a great compassionate heart is awakened in them. 4. The Dharmakaya whose self-nature is a vision and a dream, what is there to praise? Real existence is where rises no thought of existence and non-existence. 5. The Buddha does not abide in nirvana, nor does nirvana in the Buddha. It goes beyond. 5. He whose appearance is beyond the senses and sense objects and is not to be seen. Enlightenment and the enlightened, also being and non-being. By them or in them. How could praise or blame be predicated of him, O Muni? 6. The Dharmakaya is like a vision, like a dream, and how could it be praised? When one realizes that it has no substance, it is birthless, this is called praising the Buddha. 6. With thy wisdom and compassion. Thou comprehendest the egoless nature of things and persons and art eternally clean of the evil passions and of the hindrance of knowledge because they both are without signs of individuality. 7. The Buddha has no marks belonging to the senses and sense objects. Not to see is to see the Buddha. How could there be praising and blaming in the Muni? 7. Thou dost not vanish in nirvana, nor does nirvana abide in thee. For it transcendeth the dualism of the enlightened and enlightenment as well as the alternatives of being and non-being. 8. When one sees the Muni so tranquil and detached from birth and death, this one not only in this life but after is free from attachments, has nothing to grasp. 8. Those who see the Muni so serene and beyond birth, are detached from cravings and remain stainless in this life and after. 4. A further examination of the Sutra as to its LNNER connections. Having finished what I wished to remark, though sketchily, about those chapters which are wanting in Gyupabhadra, and which, therefore, can logically be judged as later additions, one proceed to make some general statements about the Sutra as to its form and contents and their inner connections. The text takes throughout a form of dialogue between the Buddha and the Bodhisattva Mahamati. No other bodhisattvas or arhats appear on the scene, though the dialogue is supposed to take place in an assembly of the bhikshus and bodhisattvas as in other sutras. Gyupabhadra fixes the scene of the sutra at the summit of Mt. Lanka in the southern sea, but in it there is no mention whatever of Rava, who, in Bodhirasai and Sikshananda, plays an important role, though in the first chapter only, as the initiator of the discourses that follow. Mahamati opens the dialogue by praising the virtues of the Buddha, whose wisdom sees that the world is a shadow but whose love embraces all suffering beings. Mahamati then proceeds to ask the world-honored one about 108 subjects. The Buddha answers, "Let sons of the victorious one ask me, and, O Mahamati, you too ask, and I will talk to you about my inner realization." Now we ask, what is the relation between the Buddha's inner realization and Mahamati's 108 questions, about which he wishes to be enlightened? Are all these subjects concerned with the realization itself? There must be some connection between the Buddha's replies and Mahamati's questions. If not, they are certainly talking about things of no concern to each other. Let us see, however, what questions issue from the lips of Mahamati now and what are the subjects he is interested in. The questions are set forth in gathas 12 to 59 inclusive, in chapter 2 of the Sanskrit text. But what a conglomeration! Some of them are, indeed, quite to the point as they refer, for instance, to the origin of intellection and mental confusion, and to their purification, emancipation, Dhyana, Alaya-vijiíana, Manovijiíana, Cittamatra, non-ego, relative truth, phenomenality of existence, truth of suchness, the supreme wisdom, Buddha of transformation, Buddha of recompense, absolute Buddhahood, enlightenment, etc. But at the same time there are questions concerning medicine. Certain mythical gardens, mountains, woods, the capturing of elephants, horses, deer, the gathering of clouds in the sky, rules of prosody, the 6 seasons of the year, racial origins, etc. These do not seem to be properly asked of the Buddha, who is not a college professor, or rather a primary school teacher, but the master of spiritual enlightenment. Why are the contents of the 108 questions of such a mixed character? What is more astounding are the answers that are supposed to enlighten the questioner given by the Buddha. The gathas 61 to 96 are the words of the Buddha, who is the wisest man in the world, and Wh0 is willing to disclose all the secrets of the Mahayana teaching that have been taught by all the Buddhas. He states in the beginning, birth, no birth, nirvana, emptiness aspect, transformation. All these are without self-nature. The Buddhas born of Paramitha, Sravakas, sons of the victorious one, philosophers, formless deeds. Mt. Sumuru, the great ocean. Mountains, isles, lands, earths. stars, the sun, the moon. Philosophers, deities, and also asura. Emancipation, self-control, the psychic faculties, the powers, dhyanas, samadhis. Niraya and the miracles, the bodhayatgas, and even the paths. Dhyanas and apramanas, skandhas, and going and coming. Samapati and nirayas. They are mental disturbances, only words. The mind, will, intelligence, non-ego, the 5 dharmas. So are they too. So far, the answer, whatever be its exact purport, is more or less cogent to the main ideas of the Lankavatara. But what follows is strange not only from the doctrinal point of view but from literary construction. They are often not answers but questions, some of which are mere repetitions of the questions themselves. For instance, the Buddha is made to answer the 108 questions in this way. How are the elephant, horse, and deer caught? You tell me. How is the conclusion drawn from the combination of cause and illustration? What is meant by doing and being done? By various forms of mental confusion and the truth why they are both of mind only and are not visible, that is, not objective. There is no gradation of the stages. What is the turning of the imageless? Tell me, what about books, the medical sciences, artist? /C skill, the arts? A glance is sufficient to see what kind of an answer this is. Questions and answers are curiously mixed up, and trifles and grave matters, too. The gathas go on more or less like this until the Buddha concludes thus. O son, thou askest me such like and many other questions. Each is in agreement with the right form, having nothing to do with erroneous views. I will tell thee now what the perfect doctrine is. Listen to me. According to the teaching of the Buddhas, I will make a declaration in complete sentences of 108 clauses. O son, listen thou to me. With what right form are the questions proposed by Mahamati supposed to be in conformation? From what erroneous views are they to be regarded as free? Whatever we may say about them, one thing is sure, that all these questions and answers are incoherently strung together. And we fail to find any logical interpretation to the whole body of the gathas making up the first part of the Lankavatara Sutra. Is some historical background needed to get a clue to the solution? Another source of confusion is discovered when we go on with Buddha's so-called 108 clauses, which are enumerated soon after. Evidently these clauses have nothing to do with the questions, although the number, which seems to be a favorite one, at least with the Buddhists, is substantially the same. The 108 clauses preached by the Buddhas of the past are a string of negations, negating any notion that happened to come into the mind at the moment, apparently with no system, with no special philosophy in them. These negations are another example of the irrationality of the Lankavatara. At that time Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Buddha, O thou blessed one, what are these 108 clauses? Why? The Buddha said, what is termed as birth, is not birth. What is termed as eternal, is not eternal. What is termed as form, is not form. What is termed as abiding, is not abiding. The negations go on like this concerning varieties of things not only religious and philosophical but of common experience. They comprise such terms as self-nature, mind, emptiness, cause and condition, passions, purity, master and disciple, racial distinctions, being and non-being, inner realization, contentment with existence, water, number, clouds, wind, earth, nirvana, dreams, mirage, heaven, food and drink, the paramithas, the heavenly bodies, medical science, industrial arts, dhyanas, hermits, royalty, sex, taste, doing, measuring, seasons of the year, plants and vines, letters, etc. The number of terms, according to our calculation, seems to be a trifle less than 108, but this does not matter very much. What does matter is the subject matter and the ultimate significance of the negations. Are all these negations from the point of view of absolute sunyata philosophy? Why are the denials merely enumerated and no explanations given? Is it meant that these subjects are what engaged the attention of all the Buddhas of the past? Why, but for what? Why are they all important notions for the emancipation of sentient beings? Are they the subjects to be treated in the body of the Lankavatara? If so, how is it that the 8 Vijiíanas, which occupy a position of chief interest in the sutra, are not at all mentioned here? In short, the presence of these so-called 108 questions forming the first section of the Lankavatara proper, can safely be cut off as not essentially belonging to the teachings. A similar problem must have been in the mind of Fa Tsung, one of the helpers in the translation of Sikshananda and a commentator of great importance, when he wrote the following in Bis. According to what one understand, the Lankavatara exists in 3 forms. The largest contains 100,00 slokas, which, as is mentioned in the Kaihuang catalogue of the Tripitaka, is preserved in the mountains of Nanshe Chupian. TFFJG. I.M. of Uteen, not only of the Lankavatara but of 10 other sutras, the largest of which consists of 100,000 slokas each. The second large edition of the Lankavatara has 36,000 slokas. Of this mention is made in all the Sanskrit texts whose translations we have here. In this edition a chapter is devoted to answering in detail all the 108 questions. And Mitoshan, master of the Tripitaka from Tu Boolo, is said to have personally studied the text while in India. It is also said that in the Western countries there is at present a commentary written by the Bodhisattva Nagarjuna on this 36,000 sloka text of the Lankavatara. The smallest, the third text, contains only a little over 1,000 slokas, and is known as the Lankahridaya, which translated means, the substance of the Lasika. The present text is that. Formerly, it was designated as the Lanka in 4 fasciculi is the one in which further abridgment was effected. The existence of the 3 kinds of the Lankavatara text may be mythical, as is the case with other sutras, of which a tradition of similar nature is stated. But it is probable that the Lankavatara which we have at present in the 3 Chinese translations and in the Nanzhou Sanskrit edition is an abridgment of a larger and fuller text. That is, selections made from it by a Mahayana scholar who took them down in his notebook for his own use. And that in the larger text not only the 108 questions but the 108 clauses are systematically answered and explained. In any event, something more than the present text of the Lankavatara is needed to understand it thoroughly and harmoniously. The Lankavatara proper may be said to begin after these questions and clauses, each 108 in number. What follows here concerns the system of Vijiíanas and their functions. But this paragraph does not last long. And after making some sketchy and not quite intelligible statements about the Vijiíana, it slides off into other subjects, such as 7 kinds of self-nature or category, 7 kinds of truth, manifestations of self-mind, the problem of becoming, the world conception and the religious life of certain Srama 1.1 as, who are evidently Buddhists, etc. When these subjects have received barely an outline treatment, the text returns to the Vijiíana, and after that a variety of subjects is discussed as is to be seen later. When an index of the contents of the whole sutra will be given, but always in reference to the attainment of the inner realization. Though the sutra makes frequent detours away from the main subject, which is inevitable from the nature of the textual construction. It revolves around the truth that the whole system of Mahayana philosophy is based on such notions as sunyata, anutpada, anubhaga, Cittamatra, etc. And that all these notions cannot be grasped and taken into one's life in their true perspective unless a spiritual insight is gained. When there issues transcendental knowledge and supreme enlightened merit. We can thus almost say that there are as many subjects treated in the Lankavatara as it can be cut up into so many separate paragraphs, each paragraph consisting sometimes of a prose part and its corresponding verse, but sometimes in long or short prose part only, not accompanied by verse. The same subjects are sometimes repeated more or less fully. The Japanese commentator Kokuan Shiren, who is also the author of a history of Japanese Buddhism known as the Genko Skakusho in 30 fasciculi, divides the Gubyabhadra version of 4 fasciculi into 86 sections, including the last chapter on meat eating. This is the most rational way of reading the sutra, as in each of his sections only one subject is treated. There is another thing which we must not let escape attention here. It is the refutation of the philosophies of other schools which were flourishing then in India. The Lokayata, Sikya, Vaishshika, and other schools are cursorily reviewed as not in agreement with the Buddhist teaching, or as not to be confused with it.